Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves in a truly fascinating cognitive bias, one that quietly impacts how we see the world and everyone in it.
Yeah, it's a really subtle one.
It is. And our mission, as always, is to dive into the provided sources here. It's a concise explanation of the false consensus effect, and together uncover the most impactful insights, helping us and you truly grasp this powerful concept.
Absolutely.
Have you ever been absolutely sure that, everyone thinks like me or everyone does what I do, only to find out you were completely wrong?
Happens all the time.
Exactly. Today, we're going to explore why our brains pull that trick on us.
Precisely. Imagine you're standing in a small room, and maybe everyone there loves pineapple on pizza.
Okay, controversial start.
Maybe.
Hmm.
But the false consensus effect is that sneaky bias that makes you instinctively believe, well, if everyone here loves it, then surely everyone outside must too.
Yeah.
It's essentially our brain overestimating how much others share our beliefs, our values, or, even our questionable pizza choices.
Right.
It really boils down to that simple phrase. We assume that most people think like me,
Mhm.
or what I do is what most people would do, even when often that's simply not true.
That initial definition really highlights how easily our brains can, well, play tricks on us. So, okay, if we want to spot this bias in action, what are the telltale signs? How does this everyone thinks like me assumption actually manifest day to day?
Well, there are a few core characteristics that define it, and they really do show up everywhere. First, there's what we call the overestimation of agreement.
Okay.
This is where people genuinely believe their opinions are more common or widely shared than they actually are. For example, someone who skips voting might assume, most people don't vote either, even if the statistics tell a very different story.
So it's not just like a hunch, it's a deeply held conviction that your view is the popular one. That's a powerful distinction. What's the next key characteristic we should look out for?
The second one is the projection of one's own behavior. Individuals frequently use their own choices as a primary reference point for predicting how others will act. Right?
So if you happen to eat fast food often, you might genuinely believe that everyone eats fast food regularly. You're, projecting your own reality onto the wider world.
And I can see how that could lead to some really interesting social miscalculations. What about the role of the groups we belong to? Does that amplify this effect?
Oh, absolutely. And that brings us neatly to the third point, the influence of group identity. This effect is often stronger, much stronger sometimes, within groups where people share similar backgrounds or values.
Like an echo chamber.
Exactly like an echo chamber or a bubble,
Hmm.
members reinforce each other's beliefs, and that leads them to dramatically exaggerate how normal or widespread those beliefs are within the larger population. It's a powerful feedback loop.
That truly makes so much sense. It's incredible how those subconscious mental shortcuts and maybe that desire for validation can so powerfully distort our perception of reality. Okay, so now we understand the what. Let's try and tackle the why. Why does our brain do this? What are the psychological mechanisms actually behind the false consensus effect? It seems to boil down to a few mental shortcuts and some self-protective tendencies that are pretty deeply ingrained. One major factor is the availability heuristic.
Availability heuristic. Okay, break that down.
Yeah, so we naturally use our own experiences and our immediate social circles as mental shortcuts.
Right.
Since our own beliefs and the people we talk to most are most available, are, top of mind.
What comes to mind easily?
Precisely. Our brain makes a swift, often unconscious leap, assuming that reflects the larger population. It's efficient, maybe, but it often leads us astray from what's truly out there.
It's like our personal experience becomes the default setting for the entire world. That's a fascinating, if sometimes misleading, shortcut. What else is at play?
Another powerful driver is self-esteem protection. This is astonishingly powerful, actually. Our brains seem wired to protect our sense of being right and fitting in.
Oh, okay.
Believing others agree with us makes us feel validated, smart, and it reduces that uncomfortable fear of being wrong or, being an outlier. And the core insight here is that this isn't usually a conscious choice. It's more like an unconscious defense mechanism. It makes us filter reality to keep ourselves feeling comfortable, secure.
So we're almost motivated to believe others agree with us because it feels good. That's a truly insidious aspect of this bias. What's the third piece of this puzzle?
And finally, there's selective exposure. This is a tendency we all have, I think. People tend to surround themselves with like-minded individuals.
Sure, friends, news sources.
Exactly. Friends, the media they consume, the online communities they join. This constant reinforcement of their own views naturally bolsters the illusion that their perspective is, in fact, the majority view. We
Right.
essentially curate our own reality bubble.
That makes perfect sense. We build our own little bubbles, and then we wonder why everyone outside those bubbles isn't seeing what we're seeing. Okay, so let's bring this to life with some concrete examples from the source material. How does this play out in everyday situations that, we might all recognize?
Yeah, you see it everywhere once you know what to look for. Um, Consider a college student who drinks heavily.
Okay.
They might genuinely assume most students drink this much, when in reality, the majority probably don't.
That's a classic example, thinking your behavior is the norm for your peer group, even when it's actually an outlier.
Exactly. Or imagine a person who is strongly opposed to a specific social policy.
Right.
They might easily fall into thinking everyone is against it,
Hmm.
even if, say, surveys show broad public support for that policy.
Mm.
It's about mistaking your passionate stance or your group's stance for a universally held one.
And it's so easy to slip into that, isn't it? It really highlights why looking at actual data, not just our gut feeling or our immediate circle, is so important. What about a more, let's say, ethically tricky scenario?
Indeed. In a more ethically challenging situation, someone who maybe cheats on their taxes might believe, oh, almost everyone does it,
Hmm.
which conveniently serves to justify their own actions, right? It makes them feel less guilty. It's a way to normalize behavior that might otherwise feel wrong.
So, what does this all mean then? Beyond just these examples, what are the actual consequences of falling prey to this cognitive bias, especially if we're not even aware it's happening most of the time?
The consequences can be quite significant, both personally and socially. Firstly, it leads pretty directly to social misunderstanding. We can
Mhm.
severely misjudge what society at large actually believes or values,
Right.
creating a kind of distorted view of reality.
Which means we're basically walking around with a map of the world that doesn't quite match the territory.
Precisely. That's a good way to put it. Secondly, it can contribute to polarization.
How so?
Well, when groups overestimate the support for their own specific views, it tends to deepen divides. They mistakenly believe the other side is just a tiny, misguided minority rather than, a significant portion of the population with potentially valid reasons.
That's a powerful insight into why some debates feel so intractable. Each side might be convinced they have this overwhelming silent majority behind them.
It truly is. Thirdly, it leads to significant decision-making errors. Think about businesses or even policymakers who rely too heavily on their personal opinions or their immediate circle's views.
Yeah.
They may completely misjudge public demand or the actual needs of a community. I remember reading about a product launch that completely flopped because the internal team was just so sure everyone shared their very niche enthusiasm.
Oh, wow.
It's a classic example of this bias in action, isn't it?
That's a terrifying thought for any business leader, basing major decisions on what you think is common instead of what actually is. And finally, we touched on it with the tax example, but what about that self-justification piece?
Yes. And it's a big one. It provides powerful self-justification. People feel less guilt or remorse about their actions if they can convince themselves that everyone else is doing it, regardless of whether that's actually true. It's a very effective way to rationalize behavior, unfortunately.
It's clear how personal this bias can be, sort of warping our individual perceptions. But where do we see this pop up constantly in much broader contexts, beyond just our personal assumptions?
Oh, it's truly woven into the fabric of many larger systems. In politics, for instance, it's incredibly prevalent. People often believe their preferred candidate or political opinion is far more popular than objective polls might suggest.
Yeah, you see that a lot.
And this can lead to genuine surprise and frustration when election results don't align with their perceived consensus.
That certainly explains a lot of the post-election head-scratching we sometimes see. What about in the business world? You mentioned the failed product.
Right. In marketing and business, companies frequently make the mistake of assuming their customers share their tastes, their preferences, or even their priorities. This can lead to product failures or ineffective marketing campaigns if they're not careful. It's really why objective market research is so crucial. It's essentially a tool to counter this very false consensus effect.
Which means companies that don't do their homework are essentially operating under a kind of self-imposed delusion. And what about just in our day-to-day lives outside of big politics or commerce?
And of course, in everyday life, it's a constant source of, well, friction sometimes. Misunderstandings often arise in friendships or relationships when one person assumes, oh, this is normal, or everyone does it this way,
Right.
but the other person clearly doesn't see it that way at all. And that can lead to friction, arguments, things that could potentially be avoided with a bit more awareness of this tendency. It's truly a silent but significant contributor to miscommunication.
That was truly an illuminating deep dive into how our brains sometimes, well, trick us into thinking we're all on the same page. The false consensus effect, it's our brain's powerful tendency to project our own worldview onto others, making us believe our thoughts and behaviors are way more common than they actually are.
Yeah, that sums it up well.
So, knowing about the false consensus effect, how might you listening approach conversations differently now, especially maybe when discussing sensitive topics? How can this awareness help you pause before assuming or perhaps even become a more empathetic and maybe more accurate observer of the world around you?
That's a good question to reflect on.
Definitely something to think about. Because understanding this bias, even a little, can truly change how you interact with others. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.